I have a couple of practical issues to highlight. We have no fire drill planned tonight, so if there is a fire alarm, please make your way out of the building in a calm and orderly fashion as guided by staff. People with mobility issues should gather in the foyer on the left-hand side as you leave the chamber, near to the balustrade where assistance will be provided. Toilets are at the far end of the corridors, either side of the chamber, ladies to the left as you leave and gents to the right. May I ask, if you need to leave and return to the council chamber during the meeting, you ensure that the doors do not slam after you. Apologies have been received from councillors Galvin, Osborne, Prinsley and Worley. Could I please ask Councillor Wright to say a few words about the sad passing of Dr. J. Peter English, former Lord Mayor who recently passed away?
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. And it's a great honour to speak very briefly on behalf of Dr. Peter English. Dr. English served as Lord Mayor of Norwich from 1978 to 1979, and was actually a local doctor. And many of us probably knew Peter firstly from being our local GP rather than Lord Mayor. From a personal perspective, he caused me some pain when I was a young child taking care of a rather troublesome verruca. But as we move on, but Peter and his wife Rosemary were hugely significant in their local community. They were residents of Eton and attended Holy Trinity Church. Up until a stroke that Peter had last year, he was a regular attendee at many civic events and would often be in this chamber when former civics came along. But while I was Lord Mayor, I had the great pleasure to attend Peter and Rosemary's 70th wedding anniversary during April. That was a really fun-filled event, lots of friends and family there, and it is really sad that he didn't get to live too much longer after that. Thank you.
Thank you. Could I please ask Councillor Stannard to say a few words about the passing of Lyndon Driver, wife and consort of former Lord Mayor, Councillor Keith Driver?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. It's with great sadness that I have to acknowledge that former Lady Mayor and wife of City Councillor Keith Driver, Lyndon Driver, recently passed away. As I say, she's succeeded by her husband Keith, who's here with us tonight, of course, also a former Lord Mayor. And we again pass our condolences and support to Keith at this very difficult time, and I believe we're going to mark a minute's silence. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
We will now stand for a minute's silence. apologies, Councillor Osborne is present here tonight. I now move on to declarations of interest. Do any members have any declarations of interest to make on any items on the agenda? Item 3, questions from the public. We have received 3 public questions. The first is from Mr. James Hawkins. Mr. Hawkins, would you please ask your question?
Good evening and thank you, Lord Mayor. This question is to the Cabinet Member for Housing. The Cabinet Member for Housing will have read the Complaints, Performance and Service Improvement Report from her department, which went to Cabinet in July. It looks from the outside pretty astounding to see such wholesale non-compliance with Ombudsman requirements of competence. 35.9% of tenants believe the home they are provided isn't well maintained. 52.6% aren't satisfied communal areas are kept clean and maintained. And if you make a complaint, it turns out it isn't routine practice to be kept informed if the council can't respond within its deadlines, which happens 55% of the time in stage 1, and complaints cannot be prioritised by their complexity nor the complainant's personal circumstances. Does she agree with the Ombudsman conclusion that this isn't acceptable? More to the point, will there be any policy changes at the Cabinet level to address this beyond the work that is carried out by officers to improve performance?
Councillor Jones, would you please give your reply?
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and thank you for your question. I only want the best for our residents and would always rather that we get things right first time with no need for residents to complain. There are always improvements we can make. In our self-assessment against the requirements of new code, we've reported a small number of requirements, 7 out of 72, where we currently fall short of the standard required. Work is being done to ensure compliance with the code and to improve our service to residents, including implementing new procedures to prioritise complaints and communicating during investigations. Local social housing providers, we are required to publish a set of 22 tenant satisfaction measures. The regulator is yet to publish the results from all the social housing providers. However, we have actively sought to compare our performance with a peer group of around 200 other providers. Our satisfaction results around providing a home that is well maintained and with keeping communal areas clean and well maintained are both lower than the average results in the peer group and lower than our aspirations. However, it's pleasing to hear from tenants who took part in the survey during April to June this year that their satisfaction in both these areas has increased. We will continue to make improvements to our homes and communal areas so they are warm, safe and in good repair and places where people are proud to live.
Mr. Hawkins, you are allowed 1 supplementary question. Do you have a supplementary question? You have 1 minute.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Jones, for your response. I do worry, as well as what is outlined by the Ombudsman report, about complaints that never actually make it into these numbers. So let's say that you're a vulnerable person with a housing problem. It was confirmed to me last year at a Cabinet meeting that no record is kept of letters that are received by the Council and whether they're actioned. I don't believe this has changed, so you're out of luck if you're tech illiterate. It's often been said that as a last resort you should contact your MP, but there doesn't seem to be any public record of surgeries on Clive Lewis's website. You could always try your local councillor, but if you live in the university ward like me, they might not be advertising any surgeries either. So, if you were in this situation, needed to make a housing complaint, where would you recommend residents go?
We have responded to complaints that are letters because I've seen them. So, and you mentioned Clive Lewis running surgeries. He does, because I've directed residents to them and I've spoken to residents who've attended them.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. The second question is from Ms Daisy Powling. Ms Powling was unable to attend this meeting. I will read out the question. Small recyclables scheme. Having recently attempted to use the small electrical items recycling collection service on my recycling day to be told the trucks have limited space and I'll just have to keep leaving it out in hope every fortnight, I wonder what people living in the city without the means of going to the out-of-town recycling centres are meant to do? How does the council assess the success of a small recyclable service from the contractor, demand efficacy, cost, value for money, future plans and contract, etc., if they are not collecting the data on what is left behind? Councillor Hampton, could you please give your reply?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. This is a response that will be sent to Ms Bowling. Please accept our apologies for the difficulty you have experienced using our collection service for small electrical items. As you may be aware, we collect these items along with textiles as part of our normal waste and recycling collections. This started out as a trial a number of years ago at no cost to the council and has proved to be popular with our residents. However, this has meant that we cannot always collect all the items that are presented to us, and we understand the frustration that this can cause. We are working with BIFA to identify how we can increase capacity on their vehicles to allow us to accept more items, and this will form part of the Council's future waste strategy.
Thank you, Councillor Hampton. The third question is from Mrs Caroline Sykes on behalf of Send Friendly Activities and Events. Mrs Sykes was unable to attend this meeting, so I will read out her question. I represent Send Friendly Activities and Events. We're a small team of parent carers who share information about accessible leisure activities and work with organisations to assist them in becoming more inclusive. We note and welcome some of the adjustments made at previous City Council events to support people with different needs or disabilities, such as bookable, accessible viewing platforms and quiet spaces for those with sensory needs. However, it is not always easy to find this essential information, nor are the adjustments always sufficient. This makes it harder to plan visits and leads to some families missing out. Will the Council please commit to continuing to provide these facilities at all future events and ensure that this information is shared in all events communications across digital platforms and printed literature? This will enable individuals with special educational needs and disabilities and their families to be equipped with this invaluable information. Councillor Kidman, could you please give your reply?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. We do provide wheelchair accessible places for our events, and also quiet places where people can go to get away from the melee. For instance, at the recent Lord Mayor's procession, I will look into the issue of whether it's a communications issue that perhaps that the provision is not always known about. Thank you.
There will be no supplementary question. Petitions. We have received one petition. The petition is being presented by Ms Serene Shibley. Ms Shibley, will you please present your petition?
Hi, I'm presenting the petition to review the sweat policy in the emergency weather protocol. We're coming up to winter now. How many of you go home after a long day and see the cold air on your breath and are happy to get in out of the warmth, out of the cold into the warmth, and wake up and scrape the frost off your cars, and have children who look forward to waking up and having snow days? And how often do you wonder about the people who don't have a home to go to? Luckily, we have policies and we have services, right? We have a winter night shelter and we have SWEP, severe weather policy, emergency weather policy, to ensure that people aren't out in the cold. Because no one should be left out in the cold, especially in dangerous temperatures. Unfortunately, in Norwich, our policies are failing the people when they are created to help them. We have asked in this petition to confirm winter shelters will be open every day of winter. Last winter, we had an unexpected period of cold weather during November, and SWEP wasn't enacted, leaving people in the cold. In fact, it takes up to 3 days of sub-zero temperatures for it to be acted, meaning that our policy dictates it's tolerable for people, some of the most vulnerable people in our community, to be out in sub-freezing temperatures for a good few days before we enact any policy to help them. Most of the homeless people are made up of the most vulnerable people. It tends to be a subsect experiencing mental health problems or any other marginalised community. And it will not be us in this room who pay the burden of a policy that allows people to be out in the cold. That is why we are asking for a review of SWEP. Apologies were made at the time, and that just highlights the need for this review. At the moment, you can only receive this support if you are officially recognised as homeless. Advocacy services have reported cases of this taking up to 3 weeks. This means that anybody finding themselves rough sleeping in the middle of winter it may take up to 3 weeks for them to receive the vital support they need. They are not left out in the freezing. When I last asked, I was told that the data on who used the winter night shelter was unavailable. Last week, I learned that apparently the service is underused. But advocacy services report people being turned away, and those accepted are reporting that these are not at full capacity, suggesting it is not underused but underutilised. At the last scrutiny committee, they passed recommendations to review the SWEP policy. We are a city of sanctuary. We should be leading the way in the district and working with our community to make sure no one is left out. To do otherwise is to forget why SWEP exists, and by extension council, it is to help people. So this petition is to call for Norwich to do better and be better, and to do as it says and provide sanctuary. This is why we are petitioning for the council to ensure that no more people are left freezing this winter. Thank you.
Councillor Jones, would you please give your response to the petition?
Thank you for your petition. Obviously this will be considered alongside the very robust and very welcome input from the scrutiny committee that I was pleased to attend. I think we are committed to providing the best standard of response, and that needs to be person-centred. I am very clear on that. And I do not agree that communal sleeping is the answer. I think we need to be moving towards the safest option for people when we're bringing them off the street. I don't think it is a simple solution. I think it is far more complex, and I think we need to address it in a person-focused way. We will be considering this petition, as I say, I thank you for it, alongside the scrutiny committee recommendations, and I look forward to looking at all those together. Thank you.
Ms Shibley, if you would like to approach the dais, I will receive your petition. We now move on to the minutes. I call upon Councillor Stannard to move the minutes of the meeting held on the 16th of July 2024.
Formally proposed.
I call upon Councillor Capp to second the minutes.
Formally second.
We will now move to the vote. All those in favour? All those against? Abstentions? That has passed. Item 5, questions to Cabinet members. There are 30 questions from members of the Council to Cabinet members, of which notice had been given in accordance with the provisions of Part 3 of the Constitution. A copy will be available on the Council's website. Members who have asked questions are permitted to put a supplementary question to the Cabinet member. Question 1. Councillor Davis, do you have a supplementary question?
Yes, I do, please, Lord Mayor. Councillor Giles, do you, as the Cabinet member for a Fairer Norwich, genuinely believe that we will not see a single additional excess winter death in Norwich this year due to the cuts to winter fuel allowance?
As set out in my response, I do believe that the government should look to review the eligibility criteria they've set for means testing and winter fuel payment, and we will be writing to our entities accordingly. However, we will not be writing to them to call for the universal winter fuel payment to be reinstated because of the reasons set out in the answer.
Question 2. Councillor Mike Sands, do you have a supplementary question?
No, Lord Mayor, but I thank the Cabinet member for his response.
Question 3. Councillor Maguire, do you have a supplementary question?
Yes, Lord Mayor. It's a huge sum. I'm just wondering, and I'd like to ask, how does this compare to the last time that we took government?
Councillor Kendrick to reply.
Thank you very much, Councillor Maguire, for that supplementary question. And in a sense, I'm in quite a good position to actually answer it, because I actually was a councillor in the 1990s. It's showing the age there, I suppose. In fact, I was a member of Kent County Council as chairman of its Highways Committee. I think the situation in local government after 18 years of Conservative government was by no means a particularly good one. Local government had been underfunded for 18 years, and there was, for example, when it came to some of our schools, they were in a poor state of disrepair. However, the situation now is far, far worse. We are now actually in a state which certainly wasn't the case in the 1990s, of local authorities in such a desperate financial state they have had to issue a Section 141 notice. Basically, that they do not have the financial means to actually cover their revenue spending for this year. So it's kind of the equivalent of a bankruptcy, though it's not actually technically quite that. But at the end of the day, that really goes to show just how difficult the situation for the entire local government sector is now. Far worse than it was even in 1997, although, as I said, it wasn't particularly good then. It took another 13 years of Labour government, which did actually put in a great deal of capital resources to improve, for example, our hospitals and our schools. The present government, and good luck to them all, is that they face a far more severe hole in public finances, both from central government and local government, than we did in 1997.
Thank you, Councillor Kendrick. Question 4. As Councillor Galvin has sent apologies, there will be no supplementary. Question 5. Councillor Yu, do you have a supplementary question?
Yes, I do. Thank you for your response, Councillor Hampton. I'm surprised by this answer, as the problems with these bins have been raised passionately in local residents' meetings, and we also have submitted councillor inquiries. It clearly is a big concern, particularly for families with active young children who play around them and dogs. Would Councillor Hampton be prepared to visit, seek feedback from residents and provide a direct report on this costly venture?
Councillor Hampton to reply.
And thank you for your supplementary question. As this answer already says, to confirm, we've checked, but we could not find complaints from residents about the specific issues raised here regarding, what does it say on this one? The smell, vermin, those sorts of things. As councillors, I really hope we can encourage residents to report these things. That's what we need to actually be able to build an evidence base and go out and deal with them. If they're not reported to us, then there's not a lot we can do. And this answer, again, outlines that we are not aware, generally outside of Norwich, the councils we've spoken to who have already used these bins for case studies we were looking at before purchase of the bins, but these are issues associated with this type of Metro bin. I'm always happy to come and do site visits when there's a need, so more than happy to arrange that.
Thank you, Councillor Hampton. Question 6, Councillor Hirchner, do you have a supplementary question?
Yes, thank you, Lord Mayor. I'd like to thank Councillor Hampton for her response to my question about addressing recurrent problems with uncollected bins at Erlen House. I was surprised to see you refer to these problems as sporadic incidents. I've not been a councillor for very long, but residents have been in touch multiple times to raise concerns about piles of uncollected waste and rotting in the sun. We have knowledge of uncollected bins, that is a situation across the city, so my question is, what is the council doing to effectively manage the contract with BIFA to ensure that all bins get emptied when they should? Thank you.
Thank you for your questions. Once again, we do not have that trail of complaints relating to these bins on the frequency that is suggested here. As far as we're aware, it does recur, but not very frequently. And again, if you're hearing otherwise from residents, please encourage them to report it either directly to us or continue reporting it yourself, even if it's frequent. Those separate incidences really help us to build up that hotspots map and divert appropriate resource. The recent issues, I think in August when a resident was in touch, I think that there's been a bit of conflation between uncollected waste and miscollections in that we've been in touch with BIFA. Obviously we are not aware that there have been miscollections, and in fact we added extra collection to deal with some of the build-up of waste. We know there have been issues with fly tipping building up, and we're doing our best. We've been engaging with businesses in the area to make sure they've got their contracts, and we will continue engagement with residents, students, wherever we think that might be coming from, and to manage that situation. But we are not aware that there have been missed collections in this instance. So we are talking to BIFA about this situation. However, it's not necessarily a contract management issue as far as we're aware. We have to deal with the fly tipping and the sort of behaviour around this particular site.
Thank you, Councillor Hampton. Question 7. Councillor Catt, do you have a supplementary question?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Councillor Jones, for your response and for the apology. It is greatly appreciated. I was interested that you say that the NCSL, there's an action plan in relation to this case, because a report that went to audit last week about housing repairs and void management actually provided limited assurance, suggesting that internal controls are generally inadequate or not operating effectively. You know, it listed that we have no idea of the number of repairs with conflicting data, inspections of work not being done, inspections of voids not being done, incomplete performance monitoring, only 14% of action improvement points being completed despite the target date being March 2024, governance issues, no risk register. Given all of this, how can we really be assured that NCSL has the ability to properly deal with these issues and deliver on housing repairs?
So I have every confidence in the change that you've made. I think one thing that's really crucial to say is some of those things you've mentioned are things that actually have changed in terms of plans in place relatively recently. So in terms of inspection of voids, I know that is done very rigorously. I've actually been out on some of those inspections myself. Real pleasure to go and visit one on Mancroft Ward actually recently. That was a whole house improvement project. Really amazing piece of work. I'm so glad that a tenant's getting to move into that. We've got a number of different things that monitored the number of repairs. A lot of work has gone into actually understanding what is an outstanding repair and rationalise that information, engaging with residents that have repairs in the system, and we've got a far better understanding of what is an open repair now. So there's a massive amount of work that's ongoing in the background, and I think once that is re-evaluated, you're going to see quite a different picture. The data that I'm seeing significant improvements in, and significant improvements in the way we work in partnership with NCSL, both from us as the client point of view and them as the provider, that there's a lot more communication and clear expectation. I'm happy to, I really welcome the opportunity actually to go through some of that in more detail with you outside this meeting and talk you through some of the stages that we're going through and the areas that we've seen significant developments in and areas where we've got work that we need to develop, and welcome your input in that.
Question 8. As Councillor Worley has sent apologies, there will be no supplementary. Question 9. Councillor Osborne, do you have a supplementary question?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Councillor Jones, for your answer. It's been a lovely answer this evening. Your answer says that there's a range of services to help staff manage their well-being. I don't know the individual circumstances over the summer, but the letter that was sent to sheltered housing tenants said that implied that basically 3 out of 8, so nearly 40% of the sheltered housing team was off for an extended period of time. Are you concerned about that?
I think we have to make a decision. Not wanting to be awkward, but you have strong feelings about the use of interims. So we've got to have a balance. Do we fill in those gaps? Do we try and manage while people are off sick? These are people's jobs they're going to return to. So we're doing the best we can in terms of, and we will always be committed to supporting all our residents. And I think there is flexibility within the service to do that. And I've got every confidence in that service that sometimes these things happen. I've worked in services where it's been similar at different points. You can't predict what individuals' life circumstances are that just happen to coalesce. And we need to be focused on supporting both our residents and our employees and make sure they come back to work, as I know they're very committed to the service they provide.
Councillor Champion, do you have a supplementary question?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Yes, I do. Given that a recent report to audit on the private sector housing provided limited assurance, which means, and if I may quote, the system of internal controls is generally inadequate or not operating effectively, and significant improvements are required to ensure risks are managed and process objectives are achieved. How do you give us confidence you have the enforcement capacity to fulfil these criteria?
I'm trying to work out how that relates to EPC ratings, if I'm honest. But we are committed to programme of improvement within the service, and if you've been at some of the budget consultations that have been going on, discussion about how we're going to influence the budget, regularly, that's one of the areas we're looking at in terms of focusing on. And that will help, but there's been investment in enforcement within that service area already, but I would ask that we focus specifically on what we're talking about.
Question 11, Councillor Francis, do you have a supplementary question?
Yes, please, Lord Mayor. As proactive checks on landlords are not happening, what's the council doing to protect private tenants from rogue landlords?
In terms of if someone is defined as a rogue landlord, that's generally, I believe, that would normally be there on the banning list, at which point they wouldn't be a landlord, but we continue to be committed to enforcement against poor quality landlords in the city, and some of the work that we can do that more efficiently that's ongoing at the moment is around the new digitisation service, that if we can reduce the cost of the kind of paperwork side of this, we can put significantly more resource into enforcement action. We have it at one pot of money, and we've got to make sure we spend it in the way that's most beneficial to the residents. So if we can minimise that backroom cost through the digitisation in the longer term, that will mean more environmental health officers, enforcement officers being able to go out and inspect properties.
Question 12, Councillor Price, do you have a supplementary question?
Yes, I do, Lord Mayor, thank you. Thank you, Councillor Jones, for the answer. It does feel like there's a little theme of a service area here with questions, and I will actually reflect upon that later, at home. In your fully detailed answer, which I appreciate very much, you make a point that the stock condition survey would take about 12 months to complete, and funding will be considered as a part of the budget setting for 25-26. So I welcome that. The following paragraph raises a little concern with me, where my question will be there, but reading that back to you just for a moment. Once we have the necessary evidence to support any decision on whether to introduce such a licensing regime or not, we can move forward through the required consultation and cabinet processes if we wish to introduce this. Now, I'll remind the cabinet member that there was motion voted to do this, so it is an action. The language is ambiguous to say whether or not we would consider doing this. I know the Secretary of State would have the final word. Can you confirm to all the councillors that we remain committed to what the motion was unanimously agreed, and that you will process this accordingly and hopefully within those budgetary timescales? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Price. I would say I'm probably a bit cautious in my language in terms of not wanting to predetermine something that actually, once we've got that evidence base, I assume I would be hoping that that would be a policy that comes before the licensing committee. So I suppose I don't want to say this is what they'll decide, because that's not within my purview. I would want to put it forward as a cabinet member, but I also respect the views of licensing committee in terms of any policy change we were making. So I suppose that's from my point of view, that would be my caveat around it, that I don't want to, I would provide the evidence, and I remain committed to looking at every tool, not just licensing, but anything that drives up standards, but I also don't want to predetermine any other democratic process within this institution.
Question 13. Councillor Schmierer, do you have a supplementary question?
No, I don't. Thank you very much, Councillor Stannard, for your answer, and I look forward to writing that letter together.
Question 14. Councillor Calvert, do you have a supplementary question?
I do. Thank you, Lord Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Hampton, for your response. It seems that rather than trying to shift responsibility onto central government to increase the penalties for those people who park antisocially, wouldn't it be better if Norwich City Council worked proactively with Norfolk County Council to improve enforcement rather than rely on central government increasing the fines available to us?
Thank you for your questions. I think this isn't a problem that needs one or the other solution. We've got to look at both. So I think it's right that along with Norfolk Partnership and with that kind of collective force, that letter has gone to government looking for a review of what we can charge, especially as your question highlights those who are trying to play the system and persistent offenders, but at the same time we'll continue to review enforcement, working with Norfolk County Council, who obviously have taken back a lot of responsibilities in this area, but so this is a problem that we have to tackle for multiple angles, really, not one or the other.
Thank you, Councillor Hampton. Question 16. Councillor Fox, do you have a supplementary question?
Yes, I do, Lord Mayor. It was Councillor Packer who answered my questions, which I'm grateful for, but I don't think they're here, are they? So, no progress has been made at the Orbit Homes site for over a decade. The promised homes haven't been built, and trees were cut down at the site, and the promised biodiversity is nowhere to be seen. It's just left residents with a long stretch of ugly hoardings that just attract graffiti. Given the Labour government's commitment to building new homes, will the council be lobbying the government for funding for a compulsory purchase order for the Orbit site to provide much needed housing and additional biodiversity?
Thank you. Councillor Packer is not present, so we'll have to give a written reply. We now return to question 15. Councillor Bolton, do you have a supplementary question?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I don't, but I thank Councillor Hampton for her response.
Question 17. Councillor Kane, do you have a supplementary question?
Yes, thank you, Lord Mayor, I do, and thank you very much to Councillor Jones for your answer. I'm really looking forward to seeing the beginning of the building of the new council housing in Mile Cross. The site, however, was and still is on Norwich City Council website promised as 150 to 200 homes, all of which will be let for social rent through Norwich Homes Options. If this is not forthcoming, can I just seek your assurances that we can trust, we can have confidence in your future plans for building of council housing in Norwich?
Councillor Jones to reply.
Thank you. Thank you for the supplementary. So obviously we've got the first phase of homes to be built, and that's crucial. We want to move forward with those. In terms of planning further development, we need to do that alongside our commitment to respond to the stock condition survey results that we've now got for our existing stock. And I would not wish to build houses at the expense of responding to that. So we've got to balance the two, but I did have a quite productive conversation with Rachel Reeves on the basis of, if you want me to build another Goldsmith Street or similar, I need the money. And I think that's the crucial thing. We've got the ambition, and I would love that to be 100% ours, and I hope we will be in a position where that's achievable. But we have got to be clear, we've got to have the capital to do that. And that is a challenge, because we do have to balance our responsibility to the existing council stock. So I would not want to say to someone I couldn't provide the upgrades they needed to their homes, paid for from their rent, at expense of building something else. So but we also do need to build. But we need that help externally to ensure we can do it. The other thing we are doing is obviously working on other sites with other providers. So making sites available for organisations such as Orwell so that they can build properties. So it's not just us building, we've got to exploit every opportunity to build things that people who are on our housing list can access. So yeah, once Rachel Reeves makes some money available, I asked her, I said I need it, please make it something that we can do and we'll build. We've got the ambition, but you need to help us with the funding.
Question 18, Councillor Haynes, do you have a supplementary question?
No, thank you.
Question 19, Councillor Oliver, do you have a supplementary question?
I do, Lord Mayor, thank you. Thank you, Councillor Giles, for your response. Notwithstanding the helpful mitigations that we can do at the district council level to help people, abolishing the two-child limit is the most cost-effective way to reduce child poverty, which is the record level. So given that, will Labour Group write to the Prime Minister to ask for the two-child benefit cap to be removed, or will they not?
Councillor Giles to reply.
Yes, we will. We think the right time to do that would be in a national fiscal moment such as budget.
Question 21, Councillor Driver, do you have a supplementary question?
Yes, I do, Lord Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Giles, for your response. To make them in touch with, I come across several older disabled people who this housing service would benefit. Could you, as Cabinet Member, please comment further on this, please?
Thank you, Councillor Driver. Like yourself, I come across many residents in my ward in Crome who would benefit from a handy person service. Unfortunately, the Disabled Facilities Grant is currently 100% capital, so while that enables us to do an awful lot in terms of capital investment, it doesn't have any revenue component to it. So what we would call for is for a revenue component to that Disabled Facilities Grant to enable us to fund a handy person service.
Thank you, Councillor Giles. We're going back to question 20. Councillor Carrington, do you have a supplementary question?
No, thank you, Lord.
Question 22. Councillor Huntley, do you have a supplementary question?
Yes, Lord Mayor, I do. Thank you, Councillor Giles. As a Marcross Ward Councillor, it is good to hear about increased usage rates at the Norman Centre. I was very concerned last year when Norfolk County Council gave notice that they would cease paying the rent at the nursery at the Norman Centre. Could you please comment on how Norwich City Council responded to protect the future of the nursery?
Councillor Giles to reply.
Thank you, Councillor Huntley. Like yourself, I was very concerned when Norfolk County Council gave notice it ceased paying the rent for the nursery at the Norman Centre in Marcross. We know that Marcross is an area of significant deprivation and access to affordable childcare is critical. In response to that, we negotiated with Action for Children, who manage the nursery, that they would pay a discount rent going forward of just over 50% of what Norfolk County Council were previously paying. That's enabled the nursery to continue to operate and serve the residents of Marcross.
Thank you, Councillor Giles. Question 23, Councillor Padder, do you have a supplementary question?
Thank you for your response, Councillor Hamilton. No supplementary from me. Thank you.
Question 24, Councillor Sue Sands, do you have a supplementary question?
Thank you for the response and no supplementary.
Question 25, Councillor Smith, do you have a supplementary question?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Lord Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Hampton, for your answer to my question.
as delighted as I am that Jenny Lynn Park has received Green Flag Award, further improvement that residents and myself would very much like to see is the reopening of the park's toilet block, preferably with enhanced accessibility and storage for park maintenance purposes. So can you please give an update on the work to achieve this and when a decision might be made?
Councillor Hampton to reply.
Thank you very much for both your questions, Councillor Smith, and yeah, I'm also delighted that Jenny Lind was one of the 3 parks to be awarded Green Flag status for the first time this year. It's great to meet members of the Jenny Lind Gardening Group, councillors down there to celebrate with them a few weeks back when this was announced. And thank you also for your thoughts on what the toilet provision in the Jenny Lind Park should look like. I'm aware this is a keen topic among local residents as well. We now have got a set of options for the toilets which have been costed for consideration. This includes ranges from a bespoke new building with most of the, well, all the aspects you've just outlined, which would be fairly costly, over £100,000. There's options for just refurbishing the current configuration at a cost of about £26,000, and although it's not an option I think we'd want to pursue for reference, demolishing the toilets, just leaving it at that, is a cost of about £21,000. And on your point about timescale, given the potentially considerable costs involved with this, it will be looked at in the budget setting process, which, as you know, culminates with Budget Council in February, but we will still look to seek other funding opportunities to help us get this project sorted. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hampton. Question 26. Councillor Harper, do you have a supplementary question?
I don't, but I thank him for his response.
Question 27. Councillor Ackroyd, do you have a supplementary question?
I do, thank you, Lord Mayor. Councillor Stoddart, thank you for your reply. You mentioned in your reply unforeseen circumstances, and I do feel that unfavourable attitudes to the Hayden development are exacerbated by the air of sort of secrecy surrounding the delay. So is it possible to give any clues as to what the unforeseen circumstances are? Thank you.
Councillor Stoddart to reply.
Yes, so for example, off the top of my head, some of the, a lot of the stonework was specialist stonework that had to be imported from Portugal, and there was a supply chain problem that caused significant delays in the process early on. There have been issues around the fountain, and my understanding is that the fountain was completed and it's leaking, so we've had to go back to the contractor and ask for that to be fixed. So there've been a whole range of issues where we've had to endure delays, but also had to pick up with the contractor what we believe to be substandard work, and that's at the moment the subject of ongoing discussions. But I do hope it will be finished and completed very soon. And I would say if you've been down to have a look at it, it's a massive improvement on what was there previously. It's a much more usable space, and also it's a lot safer in terms of the provision of ramps, which make it safer for people, particularly older people or people in more accessible for people in wheelchairs, for example.
Thank you, Councillor Stoddart. Question 28. Councillor Lubbock, do you have a supplementary question?
Yes, thank you very much, Lord Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Kidman, for the response. I like your enthusiasm for the suggestion of a coach-friendly status for Norwich. This fits very well alongside our vision, the Lib Dem vision, for a new tourist information centre for Norwich as well, and I look forward to hearing progress on both of these. I have a colleague in the North Norfolk District Councillor who is some way along the process in obtaining coach-friendly status, and I wondered if I can bring her experience to the table, and if that might be of any help.
Councillor Kidman to reply.
Thank you. CPT, the Confederation of Passenger Transport,
recognise that coaches continue to play an important role in reaching the target of net zero. The organisation's coach-friendly scheme is something I will be looking at, and for these reasons and more, and I really welcome liaising with you, with your colleague in North Norfolk. That's brilliant. Thank you for your question.
Thank you, Councillor Kidman. A second question has been received from Councillors Calvert and Fox, but as more than 30 minutes have elapsed since the start of questions from councillors, this will not be taken. This is in line with the Constitution. Treasury Management Review and Outturn 2023 to 24. I call upon Councillor Kendrick to move item 6.
Thank you very much. This report provides details of the Treasury Management Activities Outturn position for the financial year 23-24 and highlights compliance with the Council's Treasury Management Strategy and policies which have previously been approved by this Council. This report was considered by the Treasury Management Committee on July the 16th and by the Cabinet on September the 11th, who noted and endorsed the report for consideration and approval at this Council. The report recommends us Council to note the Treasury Management activities undertaken in the financial year up to the 31st of March of this year and recommends its approval by the Council. The report also asks the Council to note the change in Table 5.9 in the 24-25 Treasury Management Strategy. The Council has adopted the simple Code of Practice for Treasury Management in the public sector and the Prudential Code for capital financing in the local authorities and operating treasury management activities in compliance with those codes. The codes place responsibility on members to review and scrutinise treasury management policy and activity against prudential indicators. This report sets out a range of indicators and highlights that there have been no breaches to alert you to. The Council remains significantly internally borrowed and cash balances available for investment will continue to enable the Council to maximise its returns in the current interest rate environment. Interest rates are now forecast to start to fall and the recent base cut of 0.25% in August is the first of many predicted by the markets over the coming months. Council's Treasury Management activities continue to be monitored against the wider economic backdrop in accordance with linked asset services and the Council's Treasury Management Strategy. I am pleased that this report illustrates the positive management of our cash balances and endorses the recommendations proposed for approval by this full Council. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kendrick. I call upon Councillor Stannard to second the item. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Formally second, reserve the right to speak.
I invite group spokespersons to speak. Councillor Price, you have 5 minutes.
Don't worry, it won't be long. I thank the officers for bringing the report. I think the setup, the instigation of having a Treasury Management Committee is good governance and provides us all as councillors good assurance around the framework which we operate in. And it is interesting reading. So do take a look at it and do go through it. And I can confirm that we are compliant with the Treasury Management Strategy, as the Cabinet member has said. I guess what I would add is that today at County, the Greens did bring a motion on divestment. So if anyone is a little bored tonight, do watch the last sort of half an hour of YouTube to see the kind of reaction that received in the chamber. It might surprise you. But what I would say is that I think that as a council, the officers work hard to utilise the finances that we have available. They try to prudently invest those, and I can't speak for officers, but I can speak for myself and possibly my group, that there is massive frustration that the private investment market is so lacking in ethical investment processes, opportunities rather to invest in, and we really need to see more of those opportunities come along so we can invest our taxpayers' money, our residents' money, in a way that doesn't cause harm. That is acknowledging the fact that we already do invest millions of pounds, and I think we are investing nearly as much as we possibly can. I think I'll leave it there. I appreciate the cross-working of all three political groups that are represented on the Treasury Management and Committee, and I think it's beneficial to have the Chairs of Scrutiny audit in that conversation. I also welcome the honest and open way that the Administrations Councils, notably the leader, have worked in a positive way on that committee for the overall benefit of running this council. So thanks to everyone and for the report, and that's enough from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Price. Councillor Wright, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I shan't be adding too much to what we've already heard. Only to say that it actually is a real pleasure to be back on the Treasury Management Committee after having had a year out of it whilst I was Lord Mayor. Unless you, this maybe sound like a slightly weird thing to say, but it's actually a really good committee to be on. And our advisors, Link Asset Services, they give a really good report and presentation to us, and it's very useful for members to, I think, understand the way some of that particular aspect of local government financing works. So I would recommend the next time the Treasury Management Committee is on, if any members want to come and sit in on it, I'm sure you'd be more than welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wright. Councillor Davis, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Just to say thank you to the Treasury Management Committee, Councillor Kendrick, and the officers, and we'll be voting to approve this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. Councillor Kendrick, are there any other councillors who would like to speak? Councillor Stannard. Councillor Kendrick, would you like to respond?
Very briefly, just like to thank my colleagues who have spoken for their positive endorsements. We've got two showing adverts for later. Obviously, we can all go home and watch the YouTube video of the County Council meeting. I don't think so somehow this evening, but I do endorse Councillor Wright's suggestion that people turn up to the Treasury Management Review Committee. I can't say it's a laugh a minute, but it is good fun.
Thank you, Councillor Kendrick. We will now move to the vote. All those in favour? All those against? Abstentions? That is unanimous. Now we move on to the annual report of the Audit Committee 2023 to 2024. I call upon Councillor Price to move item 7.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. After 5 hours at county, I won't be going on too much, but there are a few points to make. I think I would start off by thanking all the members of the committee for their hard work and commitment to the work to undertake the work of audit for the council. It's a really important committee which helps to strengthen the governance and processes of this council. It's non-adversarial. It makes good recommendations and it helps to better the way we work, which is something that we all want, putting politics to the side. And that's generally is how the Audit Committee operates now, with politics to the side and working for the benefit of the council. So I thank members for their approach on that. To sort of summarise the year, you've seen the report, but effectively we undertook our third self-assessment, and it was really good to get these self-assessments introduced. It means we can kind of benchmark and measure what we're doing well and where we can improve as a council, as a committee rather. And so each year we're evaluating that, and so I think that we're moving in a direction where we're getting better as a committee, so we're offering a better service to the council in that respect. I think a lot comes out of that work, and one of those focuses, one of my focuses, and it's picked up in those self-assessments, is the need for training. We do training, and we do a large degree of that training well, and talking specifically about audit, but there are always rooms to improve that, and we do get new members And having a balance of new members and experienced members is really beneficial to the committee because there aren't really any kind of long questions that can be asked at the committee. So, but we need to support all members, and I certainly benefit from any refresher training as well. So you learn something every year. So training is a focus on that, and I think we're doing well, but we can keep improving. We are finally kind of got to the point where we're going to be advertising for our second independent person. That's something I've advocated for, independent technical ability on the committee for a number of years. And again, that has been picked up through the work of the committee through those self-assessments. So it's not just my view, it is a view shared by the committee. And now that's effectively become mandatory, we were kind of ahead of the curve on that. So I'm really pleased with that. And if we can get a second person installed who can kind of complement the skills of the first independent, then I think we've kind of got all our ducks in a row and we'll be getting good levels of assurance. So I appreciate that advertising, and I look forward to having that person in post soon. Yes, I mean, also, you know, what we've done through the year and stuff is we've sort of, you know, we've been sort of questioning and looking at our wholly owned companies. It is an area of risk at the council, and so the work of the audit committee helps to refine the sort of the governance and oversight of those particular companies. And so where the focus for me has been on that is not having as my original fear was many years ago, was about the audit committee having that kind of oversight. We consider there are governance processes in place. We've had at the last committee meeting, we've had an outline of all the processes that the council undertake. And so it's about now identifying exactly how the audit committee receives assurance that those areas are working and functioning, rather than the audit committee needing to get direct assurance over the work of those committees. So it shows a journey of progress as a council with those particular businesses, and I think we're close to getting to the point where we need to be with understanding what our responsibility and assurance we need as an audit committee and the council. The overall annual report, internal audit annual report, only gave us a reasonable assurance. Do give me about a minute's warning, Lord Mayor. Reasonable is not great. You know, it's not particularly great, but it's not dangerous or worrying. We had 4 limited reports, and that represents 20% of the reports that year. So I'm a little disappointed by that, but ultimately it shows good work of the committee, because we need to go and look at the areas we're concerned at. And if we find weaknesses, it's about addressing those weaknesses, okay, so that we avoid mistakes further down the road. The private sector housing enforcement one has been referenced today. The housing repairs and voids management one has been referenced today. So, you know, I'm pleased that we've looked at those areas. You know, from a councillor perspective, I'm actually quite disturbed at the kind of inconsistencies that were identified. But as the chair of audit, you know, I'm confident that now we've identified them, we can start to actually address those issues. We had 55 outstanding recommendations, and we're assured that that's fairly typical. However, we did have a few that were from a number of years back, and so they do need addressing. And I appreciate the work that officers have been doing behind the scenes to get that list down and to get those addressed. So I think we're moving in the right direction. I would highlight that from 22-23, safeguarding of DBS checks is still outstanding. That came up at the last committee meeting. That does concern me, and I do beg the Cabinet and officers to get that one done. Okay, that's putting people at risk. Final point I will make is around the sort of external audit market. It's a shambles. It's in a complete state. There's no fear of this government, you know, the government or the local government here. The national government need to get hold of this problem and solve it, and perhaps we need to revert back to a sort of centralised system that existed beforehand. We won't be getting proper assurance over 2 years of our audits, and that is the previous government, but that is the government's solution to that gap. I don't even believe that even by basically not doing the audit properly for 2 years by external audit, we will be back on track. So it remains a major concern of the committee, and I hope that members of the Cabinet will talk to the ears at national government and really try to get a reform in the national audit system so we can get that second level of assurance from external audit around our statement of accounts. I think that's enough for me, but I would add again, thank you so much for the support of officers, particularly the Vice Chair, and I hope that we can continue to do good work for the benefit of the people of Norwich. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Price. I call upon Councillor Driver to second the item. You have 3 minutes.
Yeah, I definitely won't take 3 minutes just for certain. Being on audit is a funny old committee. It's a long committee. We have so many reports coming to order. I believe that we should have more meetings per year, and I think that we need the Cabinet member to actually look at where to put extra meetings in, because you sit there for 3 hours and then you start rushing on the end reports and they just get pushed through. So I'm worried about the external auditors. We see them very rarely. They don't know most very much, and they get paid too much by the City Council, and they're always asking more money every year, and we still haven't had a signed document of them in 2 years. I believe that we should go back to how we were. This is the last government's fault, how they've done all this. We should be talking to our members of Parliament to try and get on top of this audit committee. This must be holding councils up all over the country. And I think we're one of the lucky ones because we haven't got into really serious financial debt yet. So the ones who are in financial debts, I don't know how they're surviving. So I believe that the training, which Councillor Price is saying, we get all the reports coming from nearly all the Cabinet members. You should come to all the training because you learn the whole council, not just one subject what you're on a committee for. So if you're on planning, you learn planning, but you're not learning anything else, but you're just learning planning. Come to all the training, you're learning all on them. So I'd advise anyone, if they see audit training coming up, and they're good audit training, I must admit, you're there for a couple of hours, and you do learn a hell of a lot. So I'd like to second the report. I think the committee works well together, all the parties are on there, and not that many arguments, one or two spokes now and again, but that's about it. I think we work together for the council and the Cabinet to work off us. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Driver. Are there any other person? I invite the group spokespersons to speak. Councillor Wright, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor, and thank you to both Councillors Price and Driver for their remarks and also for their work as Chair and Vice Chair, respectively. I think, Keith, you've probably been on the Audit Committee ever since. And I've been on it for 14 years now. And it's an interesting point that Councillor Driver makes around how long the meetings are, because when I first started on the committee, the meetings would be about 45 minutes. So, yeah, you'd go in and you wouldn't have the level of discussion, forensic analysis that we get now. And so I think it is in a much better place now. And particularly, I think since we've had our independent person, that has made a real difference to the level of questions. That having that person who actually is sort of, I guess to some extent disinterested in the council, and so can come along and look at it from a more independent perspective. But I agree wholeheartedly with the comments about the external auditors. I mean, not them as an organisation, but I think the system that we find ourselves in. And we are going to be in a position where, because we as council aren't going to have our books examined, it will almost be a black mark on our record, even though our officers are at the point and at the place where they're ready to hand over the information to the external auditors. We've done our work on time, but the whole external audit process is fundamentally broken, and so we will end up looking as bad as other poorly performing councils, and that does need to be looked at urgently by this new government. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wright. Councillor Davis.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I would like to thank Ben and Keith for their work as Chair and Vice Chair. I know they work very constructively together, and are very complimentary about each other, actually. And I'd like to thank the Audit Committee for their honest self-assessment and reflective practice. It's good to see that it's a really interesting report, and it's good to see that they have identified a few areas where they definitely need, to improve a lot. And I appreciate that because it was a self-assessment. So I just think it's good, honest practice from the Scrutiny Committee. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. Are there any other councillors that wish to speak on this item? Councillor Price, would you like to respond?
Yeah, well, just briefly, I forgot I was going to respond. I think Councillor Davis's points about some of the weaknesses, and so we will work at those to keep improving. That's what I want to see us do to be the best committee we can. I welcome Councillor Driver's point about meetings. I think we started to earmark an additional meeting a couple of years ago. We've been really kind of utilising that, but I do think that we need to look to perhaps be going to sort of 6 meetings at least in each cycle. I don't want to devalue the work that we do, and I don't want to rush through the items. I try as best as I can as a chair to keep a balance of the meeting, but allow us to explore within the terms of assurance, governance and audit the points that councils want to make. But I do think we've reached that point where we do need to have extra meetings. And I also appreciate what two of the other speakers said, how much service they've given and time to the city through their work on the audit committee. And I hope that we can continue all to work together and continue to do the work that is necessary to help this council become a better council every day. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Price. We will now move to the vote. All those in favour? All those against? Any abstentions? Unanimous. Item 8, appointments to representatives to outside bodies 2024 to 25. I call upon Councillor Stannard to move item 8. You have 10 minutes.
I won't take up all of that time. Clearly, these are important bodies on which we are represented. We've gone through the normal process this year. We've also received some further suggestions from the opposition of positions they'd like to fill. And I'm just going to recommend this to Council to approve.
Thank you, Councillor Stannard. I call upon Councillor Hampton to second the item. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'll also be very brief. Just to say thank you to those members who have been representing the council on outside bodies and will be after this is passed. I know a lot of them represent quite a lot of extra work and responsibility, but as much as they can also be really rewarding and a great opportunity to work with other partners, councillors from other local authorities and wider stakeholders in the city. So.
Thank you, Councillor Hampton. Are there any amendments to the nominations? I invite group spokespersons to speak. Councillor Calvert, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Having heard about the collaborative and constructive approach on audit, I'm afraid this feels like somewhat of a contrast. I think it might be a contrast of styles as to who is involved in the decision making. On the 21st of May this year, Councillor Stannard was elected as leader for another 1-year term. Here we are, a third of the way through that term, but we're only now being presented with its proposals as to outside appointments. This comes in the context of the same item being under discussion in the hours before the last meeting, having later to be pulled, answers to councillor questions regularly being provided a little more than an hour before the meeting, and over half of all reports to Cabinet being presented later than our constitution allows. This is an organisation and attitude in this administration that holds back quality decision making on behalf of the people of Norwich. As I look around this chamber, in every group I see members with skills, expertise and keen interest in varied functions of the council. Members who have been elected to represent the people of Norwich, and yet the vast majority of positions are allocated to Labour loyalists. I'm grateful to that Councillor Stannard has, after the shambles we saw last meeting, finally consulted group leaders. But this goes very little of the way towards the constructive and cooperative approach that we see in audit that is vital to running a council under no overall control. We simply cannot support a minority administration taking such disproportionate representation on outside bodies. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Calvert. Councillor Wright, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. In terms of the report that's before us today, we're in agreement with that. The only thing I would like to state publicly is I think moving forward, from my own personal perspective, it would be good to see this list reflect people who are current councillors or current council officers. We've got some people's names on here who've got terms that are up for renewal in the future who are currently no longer serving councillors in this authority. If we can reflect that change so that there are people who are up to speed with where we're currently at, we'll park the political party differences on that for the moment, but just really look at making it reflective of people who are currently elected. I think that would be a good start. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wright. Councillor Oliver, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you. Yes, just briefly, specifically with regard to Norwich Consolidated Charities, I understand that there's still 3 additional places that are vacant following if we approve the nominations of 4 people that who are named here. I understand that Consolidated Charities has produced a recruitment pack for interested councillors, and wonder how to get hold of that, as I'd like to self-nominate. I'm sure other people will be interested too. I have requested that twice, but nothing's been forthcoming from the leader thus far. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Oliver. Are there any other councillors who wish to speak? Councillor Stannard, would you like to respond? You have 3 minutes.
Yeah, Councillor Oliver, that process is currently sitting within, I believe it's Democratic Services, so there should be some progress shortly. I think some final discussions taking place with officers, but this is something which we negotiated with Norwich Consolidated Charities. They want to be able to appoint a wider range of trustees who bring relevant skills and also who better represent the local community. Clearly we support them in that, so that's that arrangement, and I hope you'll hear more about that soon. And I think the issue about having wider representation on some of these bodies, comparing it to audit committee, I think that's not a fair comparison, and I think there's a failure to understand how a cabinet system works. So these are bodies which want and need representatives of the ruling administration. They want people who can speak on behalf of the council. They want people who can take messages back to the administration. That's what those bodies want, and it's not about Labour loyalists, it's actually about who's running the council. And if you wanted to have a broader system, you have to set up a committee system, I guess, but even then there would be a ruling administration, and it would be absolutely chaotic if you were to have opposition councillors sitting on bodies which want representation from the administration. I mean, you know, Keir Starmer wouldn't send the shadow foreign secretary to a meeting with Joe Biden. That would be nonsensical. Joe Biden wants to talk to the foreign secretary, and it's just the same with us. The people who these bodies want to talk to are people who can represent the authority. And you know, if there's an opposition, and that is your job, you're the opposition, you're not the administration. So if you turn up on one of these committees, who are you going to represent? How is it going to be coherent? It will be, talk about chaos, it will be absolutely chaotic. So as I say, I think there's a little bit of naivety and a little bit of a lack of understanding of how the system works and in fact what these bodies do, what these bodies want. So, you know, we're happy, I'm very happy to see more officers and councillors represented on bodies, but we just have to remember that, you know, we need to be able to speak coherently as a council, and what that means is it needs to represent the view of the ruling administration.
Thank you, Councillor Stannard. We will now move to the vote on the list as published. All those in favour? All those against? Any abstentions? That is carried. 9A, motion Get Me Home Safely campaign. I have confirmation from the mover that this motion has been withdrawn. 9B, motion winter fuel payment. Please note that an amended version of the motion has been circulated to correct typographical errors. An amendment to motion 9B has been received from Councillor Giles, which has been circulated. Councillor Lubbock has indicated that she is willing to accept this amendment. The amendment will become part of the substantive motion. As no member has objected, that is agreed. I call upon Councillor Lubbock to move motion 9B as amended. You have 10 minutes.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. The new Labour government, taking one of its first big decisions, has announced that 10 million pensioners across England and Wales will no longer be eligible for winter fuel payments. By ending the universal winter fuel payments, Labour have reduced the number of pensioners eligible for payments from over 1 million to just 1.5 million, limiting eligibility to just those receiving pension credits. Many experts, including Martin Lewis, and organisations including Age UK and the Unite Union, have criticised the policy for limiting the payments to a much too narrow group of pensioners. I even heard John MacDonald on the radio this morning, and he condemned the changes. The Norwich pensioners affected by the change in eligibility criteria has been calculated as being over 20,000, meaning that 83% of Norwich pensioners will no longer be eligible for winter fuel payments. Many pensioners in Norwich are already struggling with bills, and they are now racked with worry about how they are going to cope this winter. We know this decision could force vulnerable elderly people to choose between eating and heating when the temperatures drop. I believe the previous Tory government were wrong to introduce the winter fuel payments to every pensioner, knowing that this would include millionaires and those living abroad. It was an unfair way of distributing help to those in need. But just as that was a wrong decision, so too is the idea that the allowance can just as quickly be stripped away from all but the poorest of pensioners. This is not a fair way to distribute the allowance, particularly when energy bills are set to rise again this year by 10% in October. I appreciate that the new government faces difficult choices due to the mess left by the Tories, but this is not the answer. As Lib Dem leader Ed Davey said, cutting winter fuel allowance is the government's first big mistake. The Lib Dems will table a parliamentary motion this week, known as a prayer, to block the Social Fund Winter Fuel Payment Regulation 2024, which was published last week. And they were going to prevent it from becoming law. If passed by the House of Commons, the motion would keep the current system in place. Now, those of you that are probably up to more up to the minute with what's going on in Westminster will tell me whether that has happened or whether it's still due to happen. But I don't think we have quite the numbers to make sure that there are going to be changes this week anyway. With regard to the awareness campaign for maximising the take-up of pension credits, I was disappointed that in the summer edition of Citizen, only a brief mention was given and only a website as a point of contact. It was a little piece right down at the bottom here. Now, knowing the age of those pensioners that are likely to be interested in claiming pension credits, I thought the least the City Council could have done in the Citizen magazine was to put a telephone line so that people could phone up and find out about it. So I hope that with further Citizen magazine production, we can do better than that. And I'm also very interested to know more about the plans for the drop-in centres, when they will happen, and perhaps local councillors can help promote them and encourage pensioners to go along. There is some slight good news that there is help at hand, as the Household Support Fund set out to end in September has been extended for another 6 months. So for some desperate pensioners, there will still be some limited help with them for those struggling to pay bills, buy food and other essentials. With accepting the Labour motion, it gives me hope that we can, as all parties within the chamber, can agree together to support this motion and send a message to the government that we in Norwich feel that they are making a huge mistake. Thank you very much, and I will speak further later.
Thank you, Councillor Lubbock. I call upon Councillor Wright to second the motion. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Formally a second, reserve the right to speak.
Are there any other spokespersons? Oh. I invite the group spokespersons. Councillor Giles, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. The Labour-led government is seeking to tackle a £22 billion in-year budget gap, not disclosed by the then Conservative-led government to opposition parties during the general election. In this context and the broader economic inheritance, we reluctantly support in principle the means testing of winter fuel payment. The retention of the winter fuel payment for those in receipt of pension credit will see a large number of those in poverty retain the winter fuel payment. Those on the state pension will see their pensions increase by £460 in the spring, in line with average earnings increases, reflecting the Labour-led government's commitment to retaining the triple lock. The 6-month extension of the Household Support Fund will enable our Community Partnerships team to issue grants to households this winter, including pensioners who need support with their energy costs this winter. We are confident that the government's investment in renewable energy and domestic energy security through GB Energy will reduce energy bills by the end of the Parliament. However, this Labour-led City Council is concerned about the number of pensioners entitled to pension credit who are not claiming. We would encourage the government to review the eligibility criteria threshold to ensure all pensioners who rely on the winter fuel payment to meet their heating costs continue to receive it. Extending entitlement to all housing benefit claimants would go a significant way towards addressing this. Hence, we will vote in favour of this motion as amended tonight. The Council has already secured millions in funding to install energy efficiency measures. We have also procured Groundworks East to deliver their Green Doctors scheme in Norwich. The scheme will tackle fuel poverty by providing advice on low-cost, practical energy efficiency measures, provide support on managing energy bill debts, and refer within NCAN to other partner agencies for advice and support. We will continue to fund our Financial Inclusion Consortium of Advice and Advocacy VCSE partners. This Labour-led City Council has produced a communications plan to promote and support sign-up rates for pension credit, and communications have already started. We are exploring other measures to alleviate concerns of fuel poverty among pensioners this winter. Happy to share details of the communications plan with other councillors, and we will vote in favour of the motion as amended. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Giles. Councillor Kane, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you. Yes, so we're voting in favour of the motion. I represent a ward where almost 40% of people live in fuel poverty, where each winter many people already choose between heating and food. And this is as a result of over a decade of a cruel and callous Conservative government making political choices that simultaneously rewarded the rich and punished the poor. We have a new Labour government now, but despite the hopes of many constituents that they would begin to reverse the ravages of the years of Tory austerity, this government is seeming to give them more of it. Rather than raising people out of fuel poverty, they are now pushing yet more people into it. Now, I have my own misgivings about means testing, but putting those aside, this policy cannot be considered properly means tested in any meaningful way. There's no gradient whereby those with slightly more will receive slightly less. There is not a cut-off point at which only those who could afford to live without the allowance will not receive it, but rather there is a cliff edge from which an estimated 1 million pensioners will fall into fuel poverty, poor health, and potentially death. According to Age Concern, this figure could be as high as 2 million pensioners, people who badly need the money to stay warm this winter but will not receive it. This figure includes almost 900,000 pensioners who are entitled to pension credit but do not receive it. And with that in mind, I would like to draw Council's attention to resolution number 4 in this motion, which I believe could have a significant impact on the lives of many constituents. I sadly have little faith that this government will listen to empathy and reason, but I believe we have a civic duty to make sure we stop as many people falling through the cracks as possible. This would save lives. Because as well as being callous, this policy is a poor political choice, one which will put yet more strain on our NHS at a time when it can least afford it. Years and years of Tory austerity have driven our public services to their knees and left us with this record debt. More of the same will deliver yet more of the same. We all know the horrifying results of Tory austerity. As well as those crumbling public services, they led to misery for millions and hundreds and thousands of deaths. This policy, as it is, will lead to more misery and more death. Now, I was slightly concerned before today that because this was a Labour policy, my colleagues on the Labour benches would be inclined to vote against it, but I am happy to see everyone putting country before party, and that we all seem to be, or most of us in this chamber seem to be united, and we're going to vote with our conscience and put this motion through tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kane. Councillor Davis, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I don't actually know what the Labour amendment to this motion is. Could someone let us know, please, before we vote?
Lord Mayor, if I may, members, the amendments have been circulated to you via email. My colleague is just finding a paper copy for you, Councillor Davies.
Sorry, I received it via email. Okay, sorry, I don't have my computer in the meeting, so. Thank you. It was circulated at 22 hours. Okay, the meeting started at 7:30, so hence I didn't have it. So.
Can I suggest we adjourn the meeting for a couple of minutes so we can all read this? Really prudent,
We will.
Yeah, we haven't seen it though. It didn't come through till 22.
In the circumstances, I'm prepared to adjourn for 3 minutes.
Thank you.
Councillor Davis, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Each winter the temperatures drop, and for those on fixed incomes, the rising costs of heating can be a daunting challenge. The winter fuel allowance helps to alleviate this burden, allowing pensioners to heat their homes comfortably and safely. Without this support, many will face difficult choices: heat or eat, warmth or well-being. The winter fuel allowance is not just about comfort, it's about health. Cold homes can lead to serious health issues, including respiratory problems and heart complications. The risk of hypothermia and strokes increases, and the burden on our healthcare system escalates. By maintaining this allowance, we are not just providing financial aid, we are safeguarding the health of our older population and ultimately saving lives. Moreover, the allowance stimulates the economy. Pensioners who receive this support are likely to spend it within their communities, helping local businesses and contributing to the economy. Scrapping it would mean a decrease in consumer spending, which could negatively impact economic recovery, especially in challenging times. Winter fuel payments could be amalgamated into the state pension itself. The benefit of this would be the payments would no longer be tax-free, so they would be taxed in the same way as the state pension, thereby recouping some of the cost from better-off pensioners. That would be a fairer way than taking it away altogether. Pensioners with an income of £219 a week are by no means wealthy. If every pensioner who is entitled to claim pension credit did, this would wipe out the expected £1.4 billion worth of savings from the cut in winter fuel payments. We will be supporting this motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Davis. Are there any other councillors who wish to speak? Councillor Wright. Councillor Lubbock, would you like to respond?
Yes, I'd like to thank my colleagues for their contributions this evening, and just to reiterate that we are fighting for a fairer deal for pensioners, and we're putting our pensioners first. And I'm very pleased that we can, all parties in this chamber this evening can support the motion, and it shows that we all feel very strongly about this case. And I think there is still time to change some ministers' minds, but it seems to be we have to wait and see whether that actually happens. But thank you very much for the support in the chamber this evening.
Thank you, Councillor Lubbock. We will now move to the vote. All those in favour? All those against? Any abstentions? That is unanimous. 9C, motion child poverty. An amendment to motion 9C has been received from Councillor Lubbock, which has been circulated. Councillor Giles has indicated that he is willing to accept this amendment. The amendment will become part of a substantive motion. An amendment to item 9C has been received from Councillor Davis, which has been circulated. Councillor Giles has indicated that he is not willing to accept this amendment. It will therefore be dealt with in the usual way after the substantive motion has been moved and seconded. I call upon Councillor Giles to move motion 9C as amended. You have 10 minutes.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. 2024 marks the 100th anniversary of the first Labour government. Across the last century, the Labour Party's abiding principle has been to tackle inequality. Labour governments, through differing means, have used the levers of the state to engineer the redistribution that would gradually reduce the disparities in income, wealth and power that characterise British society. However, after 14 years of Conservative-led governments, official DWP figures released in March estimate that there are 4.3 million children in the UK living in relative low-income poverty after housing costs, an increase of over 60% on the number when Labour last left office in 2010. A Joseph Rowntree Foundation report in October last year highlighted over 1 million children experienced destitution in 2022-23, triple the number in 2017. This is a shocking indictment of the previous Conservative government's record on child poverty. Child poverty is a scar on our society, harming children's opportunities. That is why the new Labour-led government has made combating child poverty central to breaking down the barriers to opportunity for every child at every stage and shattering the class ceiling and making Britain one of the fairest countries in the OECD. The King's speech set out material first steps towards attaining this ambition. Free breakfast clubs in every primary school, raising family incomes by introducing a real living wage reflecting the cost of living, enhancing families' financial security through a new deal for working people, and protecting families privately renting from arbitrary Section 21 evictions. Promises made in our general election manifesto being implemented in the first session of this Parliament. Tangible changes improving the lives of residents in the communities we represent. However, Labour knows that tackling the root causes of child poverty will require a holistic long-term plan. That is why this Labour-led administration welcomes the creation of a cross-governmental child poverty task force to produce a national child poverty strategy. This Labour-led administration stands ready and willing to work with the government's child poverty task force, our local MPs and partner agencies in achieving the government's mission to reduce child poverty in Norwich by delivering the Fairer Norwich strand of our community-led plan. We call on the government to learn from and work in partnership with local government to achieve its mission. We all know in this chamber that local government is the tier of government closest to our communities, serving as a potential hotbed of innovative ideas. Our district-level health and wellbeing partnerships, with adequate funding, could serve as incubators to fund place-based interventions to combat the broader socio-economic determinants of ill health, including child poverty. In the traditions of the Labour Party and broader Labour movement, Norwich City Council's EDI strategy seeks to firmly address not only those inequalities relating to protected characteristics set out in the Equality Act 2010, but also, as originally drafted in the Equality Act by the last Labour government, seeks to address socio-economic inequalities. Norwich City Council is committed to ending the class ceiling, which creates structural injustices, socio-economic barriers to ambitions, and disrespect for the value, dignity and voice of all, regardless of background. This motion provides for the combating of child poverty to be a key priority in our emerging EDI action plan and the emerging financial inclusion action plan, and continue to be a key priority following a refresh to the Norwich Health and Wellbeing strategy. This motion also provides the Norwich City Council continuing to fund its financial inclusion consortium of advice and advocacy agencies, and continuing to provide a maximum 100% council tax reduction scheme. It also expresses our commitment to monitoring the impact of the poverty premium in Norwich through our annual equality information reports, commencing in 2025-26. As our predecessors have done since 1924, Labour will continue to take measures to deliver our historic mission, to deliver equality, reduce child poverty and break down the barriers to opportunity. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Councillor Padder. I call upon Councillor Padder to second the motion. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'd like to second the motion and say a few words. In 2021, ONS figures showed Lakenham ranked one of the poorest areas in Norfolk, with nearby Eton as one of the richest. One of the area's first food banks was established soon afterwards, and local community representatives gathered to get food out to those needing it. The Joseph Rowntree Foundation stated a third of our kids are living in poverty, and UN reports corroborate. For the last 5 years or so, report after report, organisation after organisation have been making recommendations to alleviate poverty, with the previous government saying this will be the year we will see a difference, while our children continue to go to school on empty stomachs or are being homeschooled because of the perceived embarrassment of not being able to afford dinner or snack money. Going forward, what I would like to see from our leaders is no more reporting for reporting's sake, but more action so the benefits of schemes such as the Child Poverty Task Force can be felt and realised in my community in Lakenham and across Norwich. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Padder. I call upon Councillor Davies to move the amendment. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. We have decided to remove our amendment. We will be supporting the Lib Dems amendment.
So the amendment is withdrawn.
The amendment is withdrawn. Councillor Smearer.
Councillor Giles is vacating.
Councillor Giles.
We accepted the Lib Dem amendment prior to the meeting, so it forms part of the substantive motion.
That's fine. So we're now moving into debating the substantive motion as amended by. So we're here. Substantive motion as amended.
We will now move to the substantive motion as amended, and I call Councillor Smearer. You have 5 minutes.
Yeah, thank you very much, Lord Mayor, and thank you very much, Councillor Giles, for bringing this motion, because it is an issue that weighs heavily on the conscience of us as a nation. Child poverty in the UK is a disgrace. According to the latest data from the UN, approximately 4.3 million children are living in poverty across the country, a staggering figure that reflects not only economic hardship, but a fundamental failure to protect our most vulnerable citizens. The United Nations has consistently highlighted that child poverty undermines a child's potential, perpetuating a cycle of disadvantage that affects education, health, and overall well-being throughout their lives. And this situation is not just an unfortunate statistic, it is a crisis that demands our urgent attention. The fact that millions of children are growing up in poverty in one of the wealthiest nations in the world is nothing short of a national shame. It is imperative that we recognise the implications of this crisis, not just for the children and the families affected, but for society as a whole, both here in Norwich and indeed across the wider country. A child who experiences poverty is more likely to struggle academically, as I've mentioned, to have poorer health outcomes and to face barriers to future employment. And I have previously highlighted how stark health inequalities are in this country. There's about a 10-year gap for males between the richest and the poorest deciles, and 8 years for females. And the disparities in healthy life expectancy are even more stark. Almost 20 years difference between the richest people and the poorest people. As a result, child poverty not only diminishes people's potential, it actually diminishes lives. Now, it's great that this is being brought here to highlight this issue, as I've explained, and to try and cure some of this scandal. But actions need to speak louder than words, and this is where the new Labour government can come in. One of the most disgraceful elements of our current welfare system is the two-child benefit cap. Introduced in 2017, this policy restricts tax credits and universal credit to just 2 children, regardless of the family's circumstances. It penalises families for having a 3rd child, regardless of whether they find themselves in financial difficulty after the birth. This policy disproportionately affects larger families, many of whom are already living on the edge of poverty. As Paul Johnson, director of the Institute of Fiscal Studies, aptly put it, and I quote here, "The two-child benefit cap is the worst part of the austerity agenda." And this statement reflects the grim reality that our policy decisions are actively contributing to the suffering of children and families who are struggling to make ends meet. And it is simply shameful that Labour seems so intransigent in dropping this unjust, draconian vestige of a punitive Tory government, and I hope and pray that that changes. And this is made all the more surprising, the fact that Labour are unwilling to change this, because they have got a proven track record of improving the lives of children, as Councillor Giles refers to. In the most recent government between 1997 and 2010, children's outcomes improved on a range of measures. Child poverty fell from 1 in 3 to 1 in 4 in households with the youngest child under 5. Low birth weight and high infant mortality rates fell, and the foundation stage profile results improved. So if you can do it then, you can do it now. You can get rid of that 2-child benefit cap, and you can help eradicate poverty. And it is important that we do it. We have a moral obligation to tackle child poverty. It is not merely a question of economic policy, it is a question of justice and compassion. We must advocate for a comprehensive review of our welfare policies to ensure that they truly reflect the needs of families in today's society. So in conclusion, the fight against child poverty is a fight for our future. It is a call to action for all of us to advocate for change, to demand policies that support families rather than penalise them, and to ensure that every child in the UK has the opportunity to thrive. So let us stand together this evening and make this a priority here in Norwich and promote it more widely across the country, not just for today, but for the generation of tomorrow. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Shamira. Councillor Lubbock, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. This motion on child poverty goes to the heart of what makes a fair and just society. A society where all children are given the best start in life despite home circumstances, the area where they live or their special needs. A society that successfully eliminates child poverty. I'm very pleased to read that it is part of the new Labour government's 5th mission to reduce child poverty, to break down the barriers to opportunity and to make Britain one of the fairest countries in the OECD. The steps the government is aiming to take, as set out in the motion, are extremely welcome, but most will take commitment, time and financial support to show results. The same applies to the steps this council intends to take, whether it be the community-led plan for a fairer Norwich, the equality, diversity and inclusion strategy, or the Norwich health and well-being strategy. Commitment, time and finances are needed, as well as lots of cross-sector and partnership working. All this at a time when local government and voluntary organisations are being starved of funding. Thank you for accepting the Lib Dem motion, the Lib Dem amendment, and I'm pleased to see it appearing under 11 in the resolution. I think it's just worth reiterating about the two-child policy, the two-child benefit cap, and the important role this could play if it was scrapped in tackling child poverty. As we heard, since the introduction of the two-child benefit cap by the Tories in 2017, it has had a devastating impact, forcing families into poverty and actually costing the country 39 billion every year in additional public services and support. Data provided by the End Child Poverty Coalition says scrapping it would take 250,000 children out of poverty and see a further 850,000 children in less deep poverty. I was reminded just today by the Trussell Trust and an email that came through that in their manifesto, Labour committed to ending the need for emergency food in the UK. The email asked me for my support in asking my MPs to write to the Chancellor calling for immediate action in the upcoming budget to protect people facing hardship. So this is all part of the larger picture of poverty, with people being left without enough money to live and can't afford to wait for an economic turnaround. I will finish by just quoting what the newly elected Liberal Democrat MP for North Norfolk, Steph Aperone, said when he took part in his first vote in Parliament. He said, "I was particularly proud that my very first vote as a Lib Dem MP was to stand up for children in poverty and to vote against and to vote to scrap the two-child benefit cap, which is a big part of making poverty worse." He said there is absolutely no value in financially punishing their parents. It looks like we might all once again be supporting a motion that is extremely important, and it's good to have that unity in the council. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lubbock. Councillor Davies, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. On the 30th of January 2024, the Lib Dems brought a motion here called Giving Norwich Children the Best Start in Life. That was passed unanimously, and one of the resolutions was to send a letter to members of Parliament representing Norwich expressing the Council's support of scrapping the two-child cap. I did ask that letter to be circulated for the meeting, but I didn't receive it, so I'd just like confirmation that that has been sent off, please. Scrapping the two-child cap is essential for a society that values equality, justice and the well-being of all its citizens. This policy, introduced under austerity, punishes children simply for being born into larger families, disproportionately affecting those in working class and marginalised communities. It is a cruel and inhumane measure that exacerbates poverty and inequality, forcing families to make impossible choices and deepening the social divide. The two-child cap is an attempt to control the reproductive choices of the poor, while doing nothing to address the underlying issues of wealth distribution, access to resources, and systemic inequality. Instead of lifting families out of poverty, this cap keeps them trapped in a cycle of deprivation, ensuring that the gap between the rich and poor continues to widen. Furthermore, this policy undermines the fundamental principle of universal welfare. It implies that the state only has a duty to support some children and not others, creating a hierarchy of deservingness that has no place in a fair and just society. Every child, regardless of their family's size or background, deserves equal support and opportunities to thrive. By maintaining this cap, the government is essentially saying that some children's lives are worth less than others. Keir Starmer's refusal to commit to scrapping this policy is a clear indication that he is more concerned with appeasing to the right-wing establishment than fighting for genuine change. A Labour Party that fails to stand up against such regressive politics is a Labour Party that has lost its way. Scrapping the two-child cap is not just about fairness, it's about building a society that prioritises people over profits and ensures that every child has the chance to live a life free from poverty and inequality. To build a society that truly works for everyone, we must reject policies that punish the poor and instead focus on creating a system that supports all families, regardless of size. The two-child cap must go, and with it, the politics of austerity that continue to harm the most vulnerable in our society.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. Are there any other councillors who wish to speak? Councillor Sands.
I think we all welcome this motion, but I would like to remind people it was only in, I think it was October, November, December last year, we had widely reported cases of rickets and scurvy here in Norwich as well. Councillor Peter Princely also spoke at length about this. So, and that is a direct effect of poverty in families because, of course, poor nutrition means high carbohydrate meals, low in minerals and vitamins. So while I'm certain we'll pass this motion, we want people to keep in mind the fact that we have Victorian diseases rearing their ugly head, not just in Norwich but across the country, and also perhaps we'll keep in mind that in the future we'll aspire to a universal basic income as well.
Thank you, Councillor Sands. We will now move to the vote. All those in favour?
Councillor Giles had a chance to respond.
Okay. Apologies, Councillor Giles, do you wish to respond? We will now move to the vote. All those against? Abstentions? That is unanimous. As we have reached the 2-hour mark of the meeting, I need to ask if any of the remaining items can be taken as unopposed business. Does any member wish to oppose any of the remaining items? Councillor Stannard. Does anybody wish to oppose 9E?
You can take that as unopposed. Have a 10-minute break and come back to deal with 9E.
Okay, we take 9E as unopposed and we will have a 10-minute break. Thank you. preventing the deaths during extreme weather of people experiencing homelessness. I call upon Councillor Hirchner to move motion 9D. You have 10 minutes. Councillor Davis.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'd like to declare a predetermination on this item. I signed a petition presented to Council earlier this evening. This is a very important debate, and I do hope that paragraph 67A and all 74A of the Constitution are not used to shut it down. I will now leave the chamber. Thank you.
Councillor Champion.
I would also like to declare predetermination. I also signed a petition on this matter, and ever since I've joined the council, I've seen this can kicked down the road. I've seen it brought to scrutiny, and the recommendations be whittled down. And so as a result, I'm also going to leave the chamber, because I don't believe that this should be debated, and it should be, you know, to just refer this to the Cabinet is not a democratic process.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Champion. Councillor Price.
Yes, briefly, Lord Mayor, I believe I will have signed a petition on this subject myself. I do not feel that I'm predetermined, and I'm open to listening to debate. Can we have confirmation from the monitoring officer that if people have signed a said petition and do not feel predetermined, that they are okay to stay in the debate? So, right.
Thank you, Councillor Price.
Would you like me to respond? Thank you, Lord Mayor. I can confirm that the act of signing a petition will not necessarily render a councillor predetermined. It is for your own judgment to decide whether or not you can approach the matter with an open mind. Thank you.
Councillor Calvert.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Just a point of clarity, the Constitution says that the Lord Mayor acts impartially. Can the Lord Mayor confirm that she has not been asked by anyone on the Labour benches to move this to Cabinet?
I'll respond to you after the meeting. I call upon Councillor Hirchner to move motion 9D. You have 10 minutes.
Thank you. I'd just like to start this speech by saying how disappointing it is that this motion won't be discussed in this chamber. It's an issue of concern to lots of us, and lots of councillors, as we've seen, have signed the motion because they feel strongly about this. We've heard residents talk about it. It is an issue of concern to this chamber, and it's disappointing that it won't be discussed. And also in terms of procedure, I think it would have been helpful for all councillors to now know this from the Lord Mayor before we start this discussion, before we move the motion. I'll present the motion anyways, because I think it's important for everyone to be aware of what we won't get a chance to discuss. So the motion we propose asks the Council to take a number of practical and urgently needed steps to ensure that nobody experiencing homelessness dies on our streets during severe weather this winter and in the future. It is dangerous for anyone to be outside for long stretches of time in freezing temperatures and other forms of severe weather. However, people experiencing homelessness are likely to be particularly vulnerable to the stresses of severe weather. Sleeping rough often weakens people's health and exacerbates their pre-existing conditions, making it particularly dangerous for people sleeping rough to sleep rough during severe weather. According to the Dying Homeless Project, a staggering 1,313 people experiencing homelessness died on the streets of the United Kingdom in 2022 when statistics were last compiled. Deaths have steadily increased since the Dying Homeless Project started data gathering in 2020. The motion
that we present here seeks to ensure that Norwich does not in future become part of this terrifying national statistic. But there are also local reasons for bringing this motion and for bringing it today. Advocacy groups and charities working to support people experiencing homelessness in Norwich have raised serious concerns about how the people they support were treated by the council last winter, arguing that it was by sheer luck that nobody suffered serious harm or even death. In December 2023, a local charity worker published an open letter in The Guardian exposing their experiences, having found it impossible to get a hearing from the council through other channels. That article described how refugees experiencing homelessness were refused accommodation and left in the freezing cold in Norwich, supposedly a city of sanctuary. It raised concerns about a worrying new tone of indifference towards young homeless people that needs to be addressed urgently to prevent such cruelty from reoccurring. We have heard earlier how alarmed our residents are. They want to see action from the council. Over 550 people have signed a petition asking the council to take steps now to ensure that nobody freezes on our streets this winter. Today is our last chance before the winter to agree as full council to take these urgently needed steps. Well, it's not our last chance anymore, apparently. The motion we propose asks for two things. First, that we bring our policies in line with best practice as outlined in the Homeless Link Winter Provision and SWAP Toolkit 2023. And second, it asks that we address the concerns that have been raised by advocacy groups and in the media last winter. This includes moving away from the narrow standard 3 nights below zero criteria for triggering our severe weather emergency protocol of SWAP, whereby SWAP is activated and shelter offered to those sleeping rough only when 3 consecutive nights of freezing temperatures are predicted. A look at historical data on when SWAP was activated shows that this is how SWAP has been handled in the past. This motion urges that going forward we adopt a common sense approach where SWAP is activated and shelter provided whenever there's likely to be an acute need, even if this is for less than 3 consecutive days, and even if forecast temperatures only approach zero but don't fall below it. According to Homeless Link, any conditions that increase the risk of harm to people sleeping rough can be classed as severe, and so going forward we should take an approach that centers the field's light temperature and that takes into account the impacts of conditions such as rain, snow, wind chill and gales. The motion also urges that we take steps to ensure nobody is excluded from this most basic of provisions and that the concerns that have been raised last winter are addressed. This includes making sure that shelter is available to everyone who needs it, regardless of their immigration status or previous history of rough sleeping. That shelter is available on every day and night of the week, that it can be accessed throughout the night, and that verification of rough sleeping does not become a barrier to accessing emergency shelter. The motion asks that we are open and transparent about our SWAP provisions by making detailed information available on our website, and that we put in place procedures to ensure a smooth implementation of SWAP if and when it is activated, including clear lines of communication with partner agencies and the public. The motion acknowledges that local authorities operate in a context where resources to support people sleeping rough are extremely constrained, and therefore asks that we write to government to express concern about the lack of sufficient long-term funding, and hopefully this government will be more inclined to listen than the previous. We are bringing this motion today, or we were hoping to bring this motion today, because today would have been the last chance for this council to make a clear commitment before the winter to a sound and humane approach to severe weather provision for those experiencing homelessness, and to bring its policies in line with best practice. The motion sets a common sense baseline of actions needed now to keep everyone safe this winter. I know several of the things I just outlined have been committed to verbally, have been recommended to Cabinet by scrutiny, or are already in the works, which is hopeful news. Given that this is potentially a life or death situation, I hope you'll agree with me that we want to be absolutely sure that nothing falls off the table as we move into winter, and that we as elected representatives have done our due diligence to keep people from freezing. Hence this motion, hence today. Given that lives are at stake here in a very real way, and that we in this chamber will have to live for the rest of our lives with the decisions we take here today. I sincerely hope that we will be given a chance to discuss this motion and that people will join me in voting in favour. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hirchner. I call upon Councillor Catt to second the motion.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Again, I want to second my colleague's disappointment of the approach to refer this to Cabinet. We've seen this before with motions. You know, it's not because you want to give it extra time to consider. It's because you don't want to debate it in this chamber today, and that's especially, I think, more embarrassing given the accounts that were made in the scrutiny committee previously from those homelessness organisations, showing the gaps where people were rejected from the winter night shelter despite it never being at capacity from the council's own data. This motion, it doesn't seek to recreate the wheel. It's seeking to replicate an approach that's already being delivered by the local authorities and putting in place best practice from the Homeless Link toolkit. We need to act quickly and we have a flexible approach to save lives during winter. I know that the Cabinet member might argue that our approach at the moment is sufficient. It isn't. The policy is clearly not in line with that toolkit, and other councils have shown that they aren't doing this successfully and that they have taken that guidance completely and implemented it. I really want to focus some of my time on an approach used by Oxfordshire because they have embraced that toolkit and are doing this really, really well. And we should be looking towards those local authorities that are doing these things well if we really want to be proud of our approach. We were told previously in the scrutiny committee that we shouldn't increase our standards to meet the Homeless Link guidance because it would attract more people to Norwich. Who we would have to shelter. That's not the city that I know that we all represent. Instead of essentially a race to the bottom in refusing to improve our processes but beyond the standards of our neighbouring districts, Oxfordshire have led the way in a county-wide SWEP, ensuring travel is organised for rough sleepers across the county, districts being responsible for the travel to and from other districts where that's needed. We must do better. It's urgent, and this motion was proposing how we can actually do that. Oxfordshire, they have multiple venues and different sources of accommodation that's based on the needs of individual rough sleepers. I know that the Cabinet member is keen to say, and has said it today, that she doesn't believe that the shelter is the right approach. On its own, it's not. We all recognise that. Oxfordshire have shown that it is possible to do both. If you truly want a personalised system, having that shelter and the hostel accommodation, that is the way to do it. It needs to remain an option of accommodation. When do we currently trigger SWEP? Again, as Hannah said, we are still using an outdated rule of after 3 days of predicted consecutive freezing temperatures. The report came to the scrutiny committee, didn't recommend changing that at all, and that's one of the recommendations that we've changed. Oxford take a flexible approach, as is recommended in the guidance. They will even activate SWEP during, at each time freezing temperatures are reached, even for single night periods, in severe weather where temperatures are above freezing. And it's that common sense approach. I think we really need to remember what the whole point of SWEP is, and that's just to keep people safe.
Councillor Catt, your time is over. Thank you. As the motion relates to executive functions, I have made a decision under Rule 67A to refer this matter to Cabinet. As 9E was unopposed, this is the end of the meeting. Have a safe journey home. Peace be with you.
Please be upstanding for the Lord Mayor of Norwich.